Meanwhile, down in New Mexico, the governor, Lujan Grisham, literally said that she is not obligated to uphold the Constitution, that she can suspend your constitutional right to keep and bear arms at her whim. I'm not exaggerating this. This video, maybe you've seen this already. Maybe we can watch it again together if you have already seen it. Maybe you haven't seen it yet. When I first saw the headlines about this, I thought conservatives might be exaggerating a little bit. I thought, okay, well, surely she couched this in some way. Surely it wasn't this blatant of her just saying, I've decided to take away your guns, therefore I'm going to do it. But when I watched the video, I found out that no, this is because she has unilaterally decided it's an emergency because an 11-year-old child was shot. Now, clearly, that's a horrendous tragedy. As a parent, I can't even fathom what that would be like to lose your child, but then to have the added tragedy of that child being murdered, being shot. I can't even fathom it. Like, my mind won't even compute and won't even process it. When I read this story, the first thing I did before I even got mad at the politics of the thing is I just said prayers for that little girl and said prayers for the family, because it's truly so awful. But the reaction to something that's this awful is not to deprive everybody else of their constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Yet this is what Governor Grisham did. I will warn you before I play this video, the audio on this clip is not the best. This was taken at a press conference, so you can hear her, but you do have to listen really closely because there's a little bit of noise in the background. So take a listen to what she says.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carry license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights? I took an oath to uphold those too. And if we ignore this growing problem without being bold, I've said to every other New Mexican, your rights are subrogated to theirs. And they are not, in my view.
Wait a minute, you're talking about crimes. There are already laws against the crimes, so how are their rights?
I got it, but again, if I'm unsafe, who's standing up for that right? If this climate is so out of control, somebody should do something. I'm doing as much as I know to do.
Madam Governor,
Yep.
do you really think that criminals are going to hear this message and not carry a gun in Albuquerque on the streets for 30 days?
No. But here's what I do think. It's a pretty resounding message.
So first of all, I don't know who the journalists were that were asking questions in the background, but that's the first time I've actually heard journalists at a press conference ask pressing, challenging questions to a public figure. So whoever that was, kudos. If you want to identify yourself, I'll give you credit for it. But the questions were very good because these were the words that blew my mind. She said, no constitutional right, including my oath to uphold the Constitution, is intended to be absolute. What? She said there's an exception to your rights if there's an emergency. Where is that in the Constitution? Like, where in the world does the Constitution say all of these rights are just privileges on loan to you by the federal government unless a random government in a state somewhere decides that she doesn't like these rights, in which case she's going to take them away from you at her will, her arbitrary whim, which is exactly what she did. One of the journalists pointed out that murder is already a crime. So it wasn't, by the way, a concealed carry permit holder who committed this crime. It wasn't an open carry, a legally open carry, or an individual who was legally openly carrying who committed this crime. It was a criminal. And her only response to this is somebody needs to do something. Somebody needs to do something. Like this, that makes no sense to me. That makes zero sense. So anybody doing anything is not better than nothing. Sometimes not doing something, taking a moment and figuring out a prudent response is better than doing something. Your reaction is just an emotional discharge. You are just using your power or abusing your power to make yourself feel better. But what you're doing isn't going to help. It's not going to bring that little girl back to life. It's not going to catch that criminal. It's not going to save anybody else's life. And it's not going to stop any additional crimes. So somebody needs to do something. Is about the least emotionally mature response that I have ever heard.